It wasn't like I was suspicious. I wasn't the guy who checked his wife's phone or kept tabs on where she went. Hell, I wasn't even supposed to be in that part of town. But that's how it always happens, right? The moment you stop looking is exactly when life grabs you by the neck and forces you to pay attention. I was leaving a client meeting downtown. The kind of meeting that drags on forever and leaves you drained, half listening as some guy explains why his budget just doesn't have the flexibility. I'd heard enough for one day, so I took a different route home to clear my head. I didn't plan to stop at the little coffee shop on the corner. I don't even like their coffee. But the traffic was a nightmare, and I figured, why not? Stretch my legs, grab something quick, then head home. That's when I saw her. Alyssa, my wife of 10 years, sitting at a table by the window. First, I smiled. What were the odds? I almost walked in to surprise her, maybe playfully ask why she was sneaking coffee without me. But then I saw him. He leaned in across the table a little too close. His hand rested on her wrist like he belonged there. She didn't pull away. I froze. The world outside that window slowed to a crawl. The people passing by, the cars honking, even the stupid barista yelling orders. It all faded into the background. All I could see was them. Her laugh, that tilt of her head, the way she touched her hair when she was nervous or flirting. It wasn't casual. It wasn't innocent. And I wasn't supposed to be there to see it. I stood there for what felt like hours. But it couldn't have been more than a minute. My brain started doing this weird dance, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was just a meeting. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe no. Don't do that to yourself. I've always been the guy who gives people the benefit of the doubt. But not today. Today something snapped. I wasn't going to explain this away. I wasn't going to turn around and pretend I hadn't seen it. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. My hands shook as I took it, but I made sure to capture both of them. Alyssa, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world, and the guy across from her. Some smug, well-dressed prick with a watch that probably cost more than my car. I stared at that picture for a long time before I finally got back in my car. I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I drove to the one person who would give it to me straight without the sugar-coated, maybe you're overreacting nonsense, my brother Jake. Jake opened the door, took one look at my face and said, "What the hell happened to you?" I handed him my phone without a word. He swiped through the pictures, his jaw tightening with every glance. "That's Alyssa?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yeah. And this guy?" "No idea." Jake let out a low whistle. "You talked to her yet?" "No, good." He handed the phone back to me. "Because if you do it now, you'll lose your mind and say something stupid. Sit down, breathe, and tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the coffee shop, about the hand on her wrist, about the laughter that didn't sound like the woman I'd come home to for a decade. Jake listened, leaning back in his chair with that calm, measured expression he always had. But when I was done, he shook his head. "This isn't the first time," he said. "What?" He crossed his arms. "No woman looks at a guy like that on a first meeting. You're seeing the middle of the story, not the beginning." I stared at him, trying to process that. The middle of the story. "So what do I do?" Jake shrugged. "You wait. You gather every piece of information you can. And then, when you confront her..." He leaned forward, eyes hard. "You make damn sure she knows you're not an idiot." I left his place with two things on my mind. Who the hell was that guy? And how long had this been going on right under my nose? By the time I got home, Alyssa's car was already in the driveway. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the front door like it might bite me. I didn't go inside. Not yet, because Jake was right. I was seeing the middle of the story, and I was going to find the beginning. The next morning, I woke up before Alyssa. She was still asleep, curled up under the blanket like nothing had happened. Peaceful. Innocent. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her. For a second, I thought about waking her up right there, asking her flat out who the guy was. But Jake's words echoed in my head. You don't go in half-cocked. You don't give her the chance to twist the story. So I stayed quiet. When Alyssa finally woke up, she stretched and smiled at me. "Morning," she said, her voice soft and sweet. "Morning," I replied, my voice steady. "Why are you up so early?" "Couldn't sleep," I lied. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. Are you working from home today? Yeah. She nodded, already distracted, grabbing her phone from the nightstand. I watched her unlock it, her thumb swiping quickly through notifications. She barely looked at me. Got any meetings? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Just one. She didn't even glance up. Quick thing with Martin. There it was. Martin. I forced a smile. You talk about Martin a lot lately. She paused for half a second, just long enough to notice. Well, he's my boss. I stood up, pretending to stretch. You know, you never really told me much about him. What's there to tell? He runs the company. He's intense. But he's good at what he does. Intense. That's how she described him. Not kind or respectful, just intense. I filed that away. What's he like outside of work? I asked, watching her carefully. Alyssa gave a little shrug. I don't really know. We don't hang out. Another half-second pause. Another lie. I decided to push a little more. Funny. I was downtown yesterday. Thought I saw someone who looked like you at that coffee shop by the square. She froze. Her hand, which had been casually scrolling through her phone, stopped moving. Her eyes flicked to me, just for a moment. Then she laughed, a little too loudly. Oh, that wasn't me, she said quickly. I was at the office all day. And there it was. The first crack. I wanted to scream at her right then. I wanted to shove the picture in her face and demand to know why she was lying to me. But instead, I smiled. Must have been someone else, then. She relaxed. Just a little. Later that day, when she left for her meeting with Martin, I sat down at my laptop and started digging. The guy in the picture, Rolex, tailored suit, smug grin. I needed to know who he was. It didn't take long to find him. Martin Harris, CEO of the company Alyssa worked for. Divorced. No kids. He had that polished LinkedIn profile with just the right balance of professionalism and charm. The kind of guy who probably thought he was God's gift to women. I stared at his picture for a long time. There was something about his face that pissed me off. Maybe it was the way he smiled, like he knew he could get away with anything. But it wasn't just his face that caught my attention. It was his calendar. Martin Harris wasn't just any businessman. He was a speaker at a lot of those corporate events Alyssa suddenly seemed interested in attending. I scrolled through his past events, matching them to the weekends Alyssa had been out of town for work. Chicago, Miami, LA. Every trip she'd taken in the last 6 months lined up perfectly. My chest tightened. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the timeline I'd built in front of me. It wasn't just coffee dates. It wasn't some harmless flirting at the office. This was planned, organized, and it had been going on for months. I called Jake. He picked up on the second ring. You find something? Yeah. My voice was flat. I found him. Jake sighed. And it's worse than I thought. You need to talk to her, man. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Not until I had everything. Look, Jake said, his voice low. You're gonna hit a point where this stops being about catching her in a lie and starts being about protecting yourself. Don't let her turn this on you. Don't give her that chance. I knew he was right, but I wasn't done yet. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to destroy her excuses before she even had the chance to make them. It was Friday night when things took a sharp turn. Alyssa came home from work with this energy, too cheerful, too bright. She breezed into the house like she didn't have a care in the world. Hey, she called out, dropping her purse on the counter. Guess what? I glanced up from my laptop. I'd been pretending to work all day, but really, I was going down a rabbit hole of Martin Harris's life. His social media, his business deals, even an article in some glossy magazine calling him the most eligible CEO in the city. Disgusting. What's up? I asked, keeping my tone light. Alyssa beamed. Martin invited me to this charity gala tomorrow night. Huge event. Black tie. I'm so excited. Of course he did. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Didn't know charity galas were part of your job description. They're not. She laughed, brushing it off. It's just networking, you know? Good for my career. There it was again, her favorite excuse. Good for my career. I'd heard it before. Every time she disappeared for a weekend trip, or stayed late at the office, or answered her phone in hushed tones. It was always about work. And now, she was standing in our kitchen, telling me about a black tie gala like she wasn't going with a man she was probably screwing. Is this a +1 thing? I asked, my voice casual. She froze for a fraction of a second. Oh no, it's more of a work event. Of course it is. She walked over to the closet by the front door and pulled out a dress bag. My stomach tightened when I saw it. I stopped by the boutique today, she said, unzipping the bag to reveal a sleek, blood-red dress. It was stunning, elegant, but it was also nothing like Alyssa's usual style. Too bold, too sexy. You bought that for the gala? I asked. She grinned. Yeah, isn't it gorgeous? Gorgeous wasn't the word that came to mind. Dangerous felt more appropriate. That dress wasn't meant for polite small talk and sipping champagne. It was meant to turn heads, to get attention. Whose attention, exactly? I thought you hated red, I said, keeping my voice even. She waved a hand dismissively. I'm branching out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip that dress off its hanger and throw it in the trash. But instead, I stood up and I ran my fingers over the fabric, pretending to admire it. You're really going all out, huh? She smiled again, but there was something in her eyes, something guarded. It's a big night. For your career, I said softly. She nodded. Exactly. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I asked, so, who else is going? Alyssa blinked, like she hadn't expected that question. Some people from the office, a few clients. You know how these things are. I stepped back, my eyes never leaving hers. And Martin? Her smile faltered. Well, yeah, he's hosting it. Of course he was. I forced a grin. You'll have to tell him I said hi. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Will do. Then she disappeared into the bedroom with her dress, leaving me standing there in the kitchen, my fists clenched at my sides. I couldn't do this anymore. I grabbed my phone and called Jake. Talk to me, he said the moment he picked up. She's going to some gala tomorrow night, I told him, pacing the kitchen. With him, she bought a red dress, a dress that screams, look at me. Jake whistled low. You think that's when it's happening? I stopped pacing. I don't think. I know. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, so what's your move? I glanced toward the bedroom, where Alyssa was humming to herself as she hung up her dress. My move, I whispered. I'm not sitting at home while she plays dress-up for some asshole. Jake chuckled. You're going to the gala, aren't you? Damn right I am. I wasn't going to let her slip away into the night with Martin Harris without a fight. She thought she was untouchable. She thought I'd stay clueless and passive forever. But tomorrow night, Alyssa was going to learn something about me. I wasn't clueless. And I wasn't passive. Not anymore. I wasn't invited to the gala. I didn't need to be. Saturday night came faster than I expected. Alyssa spent the whole day getting ready. She was in and out of the bathroom, curling her hair, doing her makeup, humming little tunes like it was the happiest day of her life. I sat in the living room, pretending to watch TV while every second chipped away at my patience. I had my plan. I was ready. But watching her dance around the house, knowing she was getting dressed to impress another man, that was fire in my veins. Around 6 p.m., she finally stepped out of the bedroom. The red dress fit like a glove, hugging her body in all the right places. Her hair fell in loose waves, and she'd chosen a deep red lipstick to match. She looked stunning, but I didn't feel admiration. I felt disgust. Wow, I said, keeping my expression neutral. You're really pulling out all the stops. She smiled, twirling a little. Do you like it? I stood up and walked over to her, brushing a stray curl off her shoulder. Martin's going to love it. Her smile flickered, just for a moment. Then she laughed, like I'd made a harmless joke. I should go. I don't want to be late. I followed her to the door, watching as she slipped on her heels and grabbed her clutch. Text me when you get there, I said. She didn't even look back. Sure. And then she was gone. I waited 15 minutes. Then I grabbed my coat, my phone, and the black suit I hadn't worn in years. The gala was at a luxury hotel downtown. A place where the wine costs more than rent and everyone pretends they're someone important. I wasn't worried about getting in. These events were always the same. Flashy outfits, too much champagne, and security guards who wouldn't question a man in a suit. I parked a block away and walked toward the entrance, my heart pounding. The cold night air did nothing to calm me. Inside, the ballroom was grand and glittering. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and a live band played soft jazz in the corner. People milled about in designer dresses and tuxedos, sipping drinks and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. And then I saw her, Alyssa. She stood by the bar, holding a glass of champagne, smiling at someone I couldn't see. But I knew who it was before I even rounded the corner. Martin Harris. There he was, tall, confident, and smug as hell. He leaned in close to Alyssa, whispering something that made her laugh. His hand brushed her back, lingering a little too long. I felt a surge of rage, but I kept it contained. I wasn't here to lose control. I was here to watch, to see it with my own eyes. I grabbed a drink from a passing waiter and positioned myself near a column, half hidden from view. Watching, waiting. They moved through the crowd together, smiling and chatting with people, like they were the power couple of the night. But every few minutes, Martin's hand would drift to her lower back, or he'd lean in too close, whispering something just for her. And she didn't pull away. She leaned into it. It made me sick. Then, as if on cue, they slipped out of the ballroom together, heading toward a side hallway. I followed. The hallway was quiet, lined with expensive artwork and dim lighting. I kept my distance, staying far enough back to avoid suspicion but close enough to hear their voices. "I told you that dress was perfect," Martin said, his voice low and smooth. Alyssa giggled. "It's a little bold, don't you think?" "Bold suits you." They stopped in front of a door marked Private Lounge. Martin pulled out a keycard and swiped it, holding the door open for her. Alyssa hesitated. "We shouldn't be gone too long. People will notice." "Let them notice." She bit her lip, glancing around. Then she stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind them. I stood there, staring at the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the anger threatening to boil over. I reached for my phone and opened the photo I'd taken of them at the coffee shop. Then I snapped a new picture of the door they'd just disappeared behind. Evidence. I wasn't going to burst in and confront them. Not yet. That would be too easy, too loud. I wanted her to walk out of that room thinking she'd gotten away with it. I wanted her to think she was still in control. And then, when the time was right, I'd rip that illusion away. I waited. 10 minutes. 15. Finally, the door opened. Alyssa stepped out first, smoothing her dress. Her lipstick was slightly smudged, and she ran a hand through her hair, fixing it. Martin followed a moment later, looking entirely too pleased with himself. He leaned in, whispered something in her ear, and Alyssa laughed softly. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. They headed back to the ballroom, rejoining the crowd like nothing had happened. I gave them another few minutes before I followed. Alyssa was by the bar again, sipping another glass of champagne, her eyes scanning the room. She didn't notice me until I was right in front of her. Her eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, raising my glass. "Networking." Her face paled. You weren't invited." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Neither was your little trip to the private lounge with Martin." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in this entire nightmare, I had the upper hand. And I wasn't letting go. Alyssa's face drained of color so fast, I thought she might faint. Her lips parted like she was about to speak, but nothing came out. For a moment, she just stood there, holding her champagne flute like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I wanted her to feel the weight of my stare. I wanted her to realize there was no way out. She finally stammered, lowering her glass to the bar. "This isn't what it looks like. Here we go." "Really?" I said, my voice calm, controlled. "Because it looks exactly like you just snuck off to a private room with your boss." Alyssa shook her head, her curls bouncing slightly. "It's not. I mean, we were just talking." Talking. I let the word hang in the air, heavy with disbelief. "In a locked room? With the door shut?" She glanced around, like she was hoping someone would rescue her from this conversation. But no one was paying attention. The crowd was too busy laughing and drinking. oblivious to the fact that one woman's world was about to collapse. "I can explain," she said quickly, taking a step closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper, as if that would soften the blow. "This isn't what you think it is." I leaned in, matching her tone. "Then tell me, Alyssa, what exactly is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been screwing Martin Harris for months." She flinched at my words, her hands trembling slightly. "You don't understand. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I barked out a laugh. "No, it's actually very simple. You've been lying to me, sneaking around, treating me like an idiot while you play dress-up for your boss." Her eyes darted to the ballroom doors. "Let's not do this here." "Oh, now you care about appearances?" I hissed. "Funny. You didn't seem too concerned about that when you were locking yourself in a room with him." Her expression hardened, a flicker of anger in her eyes. "Why are you even here? Did you follow me?" "I don't need to follow you," I shot back. "You're predictable. You've been lying for so long. You actually think I'd never catch on." Alyssa crossed her arms over her chest, the defensive posture kicking in. "You have no idea what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and held it up between us. Her eyes locked on the screen, widening as I flipped through the photos. The coffee shop, the gala, the private lounge door. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice deadly calm. "I've got the receipts, Alyssa. Want me to show them to Martin's wife? Or maybe the board of directors at your company?" She gasped, stepping back. "You wouldn't. Try me." For a moment I thought she might cry. Her eyes shimmered, her lips trembling. But then something shifted. The softness vanished, replaced by a steely glare I hadn't seen before. "You think you're so righteous," she spat. "But do you even know why this happened?" I folded my arms, waiting. "Enlighten me." Alyssa shook her head, her anger rising. "Do you have any idea how lonely I've been? How distant you've been? You're always working, always distracted. I needed someone who actually saw me, who appreciated me." "Appreciated you?" I echoed, the words burning in my throat. "So your solution was to screw your boss?" "I didn't plan for this to happen," she snapped. It got out of control." "Out of control," I repeated. "Right. So what's your plan now? Keep lying? Keep sneaking off with Martin?" Alyssa's gaze flicked toward the ballroom again, then back to me. Her expression softened, her voice lowering to something almost pleading. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," I said coldly. "Because you did." For a moment, the air between us was thick with silence. I could see her mind racing, trying to find a way to salvage this, to twist the story in her favor. But I wasn't done. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You know what's funny, Alyssa? You think you've been so clever, so discreet, but you've been sloppy, careless. And now, I've got everything I need to burn this whole thing to the ground." Her eyes darted to my phone again. "You wouldn't ruin my career over this." I smirked. "Your career? I'm not interested in your career. I'm interested in the truth. And you're going to give it to me, tonight." She swallowed hard, her mask cracking. "What do you want?" I leaned in, my voice a low growl. "I want you to admit what you did. No more lies. No more excuses. I want you to say it." Her lips trembled, and for a second, I thought she'd deny it again. But then she let out a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping. "I was with him," she whispered. "Okay? Is that what you want to hear?" "Yes, I've been seeing him. But it wasn't supposed to mean anything." "Wasn't supposed to." I nodded slowly. "But it did." She wiped at her eyes, smudging her perfect makeup. "It's not like we were planning some big future together. It just happened." I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, and I felt nothing. No pity, no sadness, just a cold, hollow emptiness. "This marriage," I said, my voice steady. "It's done." Alyssa's eyes snapped up to mine, panic flashing across her face. "Wait." "No," I cut her off. "You don't get to wait. You don't get to beg. You made your choice. And now you live with it." She opened her mouth to say something, but I was already turning away. As I walked out of the ballroom, I heard the faint sound of her voice calling my name. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The door to the hotel swung shut behind me, and with it, 10 years of marriage crumbled into nothing. I stood on the street, staring up at the glittering hotel windows, and for the first time in months, I felt free, because now I had the truth, and there was no going back. The drive home felt surreal, like I wasn't fully in my own body. The city lights blurred past the windshield, but all I could see was her face. Alyssa's wide, panicked eyes when I walked away. The moment she finally realized I wasn't going to forgive her. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a long time, engine idling, hands gripping the steering wheel. The house stood in front of me, dark and quiet. The same house we'd built our life in. The place where we laughed, fought, celebrated anniversaries. And now, it was just a shell. I killed the engine and stepped inside. The air felt different, heavy, cold. Every piece of furniture, every photo on the wall, felt like a monument to a life that no longer existed. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a drink. Whiskey, no ice. The burn steadied my hands. I was halfway through my second glass when I heard her. The front door creaked open, and Alyssa's heels clicked against the floor. She stepped inside, pausing when she saw me standing in the kitchen, glass in hand. Her makeup was smudged, and her hair was a mess. She looked like someone who'd been through hell. And honestly, she deserved worse. "Ethan," she started, her voice soft, almost broken. I didn't say anything, just stared at her. She took a hesitant step forward. "Please, can we talk?" I swirled the whiskey in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I made a mistake." I barked out a laugh, bitter and sharp. "A mistake? That's what you're calling it?" "I wasn't thinking clearly," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "It wasn't about you. It was never about us. I got caught up in something I couldn't control." I slammed the glass down on the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen. "Stop. Just stop." Alyssa flinched but didn't back down. "You keep saying it wasn't about me," I said, my voice low, cold. "But it was about me. Every time you lied, every time you left for one of those trips, it was about me. You made a choice to betray me, over and over again." Tears streamed down her face now. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Bullshit," I snapped. "You didn't care if you hurt me. You cared about getting what you wanted." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like she couldn't find the right words. For once, she had no lies to fall back on. I walked toward her slowly, each step deliberate. "You know what I realized tonight, Alyssa? You never thought you'd get caught. You thought you were smarter than me. That I'd never notice. I didn't." "Shut up." Her mouth snapped shut, her eyes wide. "I saw you with him," I said quietly. "At the coffee shop. At the gala. I've been watching this whole time. And you know what? You're not as clever as you think." She started to sob, covering her face with her hands. "I'm sorry." I watched her for a moment, unmoved. "Sorry doesn't cut it." She dropped her hands, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Please, Ethan, don't throw everything away. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, talk to someone." "No," my voice was final. She took another step closer, desperation in her eyes. "I love you." I shook my head slowly. "No, you don't." Her bottom lip trembled. "I do. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." Silence fell between us, heavy, suffocating. Finally, I broke it. "I'm filing for divorce." Alyssa let out a choked sob. "No, please, don't." "It's already done," I said. "I've got everything I need. The photos, the texts, the timeline." Her eyes darted toward my phone on the counter, panic flaring in them. "You wouldn't use those?" I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I will do whatever I need to protect myself. You took 10 years of my life and pissed on it. You don't get to walk away clean." She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing into her hands. I stood there, watching her fall apart, and for the first time in months, I felt nothing but clarity. This was over. It had been over the moment I saw her with Martin. I grabbed my coat and walked to the door. As I opened it, Alyssa's broken voice echoed behind me. "Where are you going?" I glanced back at her, slumped on the floor like the wreckage of a life I no longer wanted. "Out." And with that, I stepped into the night, leaving her, and everything we built. Behind that I thought that would be the end of it. Should have been. But Alyssa wasn't done with me. A week after that night, I'd already made arrangements for the lawyer was efficient, cold, professional, and exactly what I needed. Papers were drafted. My path forward was clear. I hadn't seen Alyssa since. She'd been staying with her sister, probably licking her wounds and spinning her version of the story. I didn't care. Then, out of nowhere, she called me. I stared at her name on the screen for a long time before I answered. "What do you want?" My voice was flat. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a shaky breath. "I need to see you." I almost laughed. "You need to see me? You're kidding, right?" "I'm serious, Ethan." Her voice was quieter now, softer. "It's important." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Unless it's about the divorce papers, I don't see what there is to talk about." "It's about Martin." That got my attention. I stayed silent, letting her fill the gap. "He's not who you think he is," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Things got out of hand." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, now it's his fault? You don't understand," she snapped, frustration creeping into her tone. "I'm trying to warn you." "Warn me?" I chuckled bitterly. "About what? That you're a liar and a cheat?" "Newsflash, Alyssa. I already know." There was a long pause before she spoke again, quieter this time. "Please, Ethan, just meet me. 1 hour. I need to explain everything." I should have hung up. I should have walked away for good. But something about her tone, it was different. There was fear in her voice. "Fine," I said. 1 hour. You get one chance to say whatever you need to say. We met at a coffee shop downtown, the same one where I'd first caught her with Martin. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was already there when I walked in, sitting at a table by the window. Her hands were wrapped around a coffee cup, fingers trembling slightly. She looked exhausted, pale, like she hadn't slept in days. I sat down across from her without a word. "Thanks for coming," she said softly. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "Talk." Alyssa glanced around nervously, then leaned in. "Martin's dangerous." I raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous?" "He's a businessman, Alyssa, not a mob boss." "You don't know him like I do," she whispered, her voice urgent. "He has connections, powerful people, people who don't like loose ends." "Loose ends," I repeated, trying to keep my patience. "Is that what you are? A loose end?" She nodded. "He's paranoid. He thinks someone's been digging into his personal life. I think he knows it was you." I stared at her, my mind racing. How the hell would Martin know about me? I hadn't contacted him. I hadn't made any moves outside of gathering evidence for the divorce. "I'm telling you," she said, her eyes wide and desperate. "He's not just going to let this go." I let out a slow breath. "So what do you want from me?" "I want you to be careful," she said quickly. "If he finds out you've been tracking him, he won't hesitate to shut you down. He's done it before." I narrowed my eyes. "Done what before?" Her hands trembled around the coffee cup. "There were others, women he got involved with. And when things got messy, they disappeared." Disappeared. The word hung between us like a loaded gun. "You're telling me Martin Harris makes people disappear?" I asked, my voice dripping with skepticism. "Come on, Alyssa. Do you really expect me to believe that?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you remember my business trip to Chicago?" "Yeah." I folded my arms. "Another lie." "There was a woman there," Alyssa said, her voice shaking. "She worked for Martin. Got too close. Knew too much. After that trip, no one ever heard from her again." My heart thumped hard in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. "And you're saying that's going to happen to you?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But I'm scared, Ethan. Scared for both of us." I sat back, rubbing my jaw. Part of me still wanted to dismiss her, call her out for the liar she was, but another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was some truth in her fear. Martin Harris wasn't just some cheating CEO. He was calculated, charismatic, and maybe, just maybe, dangerous. "You're paranoid," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Alyssa shook her head. You don't know what he's capable of. I glanced down at my phone, where the photos of Alyssa and Martin were still saved. Evidence of their affair. Evidence I thought would bring me closure. Now, those photos felt like a ticking time bomb. If he comes after me, Alyssa's voice broke. You're next. I stared at her, the woman who'd betrayed me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something unexpected. I felt uneasy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Alyssa's words echoing in my mind. If he comes after me, you're next. I wanted to believe she was just being dramatic, trying to manipulate me into forgiving her. But something didn't sit right. The fear in her eyes had been real. And the more I thought about Martin, the way he carried himself, the way he seemed to glide through life untouched, the more uneasy I became. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. I grabbed it off the nightstand, expecting another message from Alyssa. But it wasn't her. It was a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Something about the timing felt off. Too coincidental. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered, "Hello." There was silence on the other end. Not the usual static of a bad connection. This was intentional silence. Someone was there listening. I sat up in bed. Who is this? A low chuckle came through the line, followed by a smooth, familiar voice. Ethan. My blood turned to ice. Martin, I said, keeping my voice steady. He laughed again, a slow, deliberate sound. I figured it was time we had a chat. My hand tightened around the phone. How did you get my number? Come on, he said, amused. You've been poking around in my life for weeks. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I didn't respond. My mind raced, trying to piece together how he'd found me. You're not as discreet as you think, Martin continued. People talk. Emails leave traces. Even phone cameras have metadata. I clenched my jaw. Sloppy. Damn it. What do you want? I asked. There was a pause on the other end. Then, Martin's voice softened, turning almost friendly. I want you to stop. Stop what? Stop digging. Stop following me. Stop thinking you have any control over this situation. His tone hardened. Because you don't. I stood up, pacing the room. And if I don't? Martin sighed, as if disappointed. Ethan, I'm trying to be reasonable here. I've got no problem with you. This thing with Alyssa? It was never personal. Right? I said bitterly. You just screwed my wife behind my back. I'm not here to talk about Alyssa, he said coldly. I'm here to warn you. You're playing a dangerous game, and you don't even know the rules. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. And what happens if I don't stop? There was a long pause. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper, Martin said, People disappear, Ethan. Sometimes, they just vanish. My chest tightened. Is that a threat? It's a fact. I stopped pacing, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I've got photos. Evidence. Martin chuckled again, like I told a joke. Evidence of what? An affair? Nobody cares, Ethan. But if you keep pushing, you'll give me a reason to care. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Then he added, Let me make this simple. You walk away and this all goes away. No drama, no mess. You move on with your life, and I'll move on with mine. And Alyssa? I asked. Martin's tone shifted, darker. She made her bed. My stomach twisted. You don't touch her. She's not my problem anymore. There was something final in his voice, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I'm done playing games, Martin said. The next move is yours. Make it wisely. The line went dead. I stood there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, my mind spinning. Martin was a man who got what he wanted. A man who never faced consequences. And now he was warning me to walk away. I thought about Alyssa, her frantic warning in the coffee shop, the fear in her eyes. He's not who you think he is. She was right. This wasn't just a messy affair. This was something darker, something dangerous. But there was one thing Martin didn't know about me. I wasn't walking away.